Hey, thanks for dropping by. Today, our story follows a woman. She waits patiently for 6 years for her fiancé, only to see him return with a pregnant woman carrying his child. Confused, she has to decide if she will endure and become Duchess, or leave it all behind. I won't pick up the trash I threw away again.
Everyone dreams of being a duchess. We follow the life of Layla, an elegant beauty with long raven black hair that flows freely down her back. Her eyes are dark and expressive, alight with optimism and joy, and she carried herself with elegance and grace. At the age of 14, Layla was taken in by Duke Williat and his family to be the fiancé to their son, Phillen. As the esteemed sword of the empire, the Williat name carries great prestige. Though of more modest origins herself, Layla is warmly welcomed into their home as Phillen's future wife. The Duke and Duchess lavish affection on the girl as if she were their own daughter. Layla is treated to only the finest gifts and education to prepare her for the duties of a duchess one day. In fact, the parents' overt fondness occasionally evokes jealousy in Phillen. But Layla appreciates their kindness deeply, coming to love them as her own family over the happy years spent in their company. She studies dutifully under the Duchess by day, while catching glimpses of Phillen practicing his swordsmanship outside her window in passing. Though often occupied with their respective obligations, a gentle rapport endures between the betrothed pair. One day after finishing her lessons, Layla seeks out Phillen, curious to glimpse her fiancé's progress in swordsmanship.
Phillen.
She spots the tall youth,
Layla.
his golden hair tousled by exertion from his training. She approaches him, his handsome face scowling, plagued by youthful doubt and insecurity over living up to his father's prowess. Hoping to uplift his spirits, Layla reassures Phillen, her eyes bright and optimistic. She insists that he appears every bit as stately and skilled as the great Duke. Phillen's mood lightens in her presence. Theirs is an affectional rapport where they can freely exchange laughs and jests, at ease to reveal their vulnerable sides. For now, Layla's future overflows with possibility and joy under the shelter of House Williat. Until one ill-fated stormy night, Layla sits writing in the study when a crack of lighting startles her. She peers out in worry at the relentless rain battering the land outside. A kindly maid offers Layla some tea to soothe her nerves, reassuring that their people have prepared well for the coming tempest. She praises what a benevolent and caring Duchess Layla will make someday. Just then, the study doors burst open with disastrous news: the Duke and Duchess's carriage has crashed under the punishing weather. As this sinks in, Layla goes numb with shock. Moments later, Phillen comes racing in, clutching her arms in anguish over his parents' tragic accident. They cling tightly together, seeking solace, praying this is all some horrible mistake. As lightning clapped around them, Layla's mind swims, struggling to process it all. She longs desperately to see her cherished Duchess again, for her to tenderly call Layla, "my beloved daughter," just once more. But deep inside, she knows her prayers will remain unfulfilled after this night. Darkness descends on the household along with immense grief. As the sole successor, the immature Phillen inherits his father's title, but descends into dark depression, isolating himself from all but his sword training. Layla too abandons her formerly vivacious spirit. As Phillen's fiancée, she shoulders management of the estate. The two agree to postpone their wedding in memoriam. Then word arrives of the emperor summoning banners for war. Phillen departs to serve this fateful call, leaving Layla behind. 6 years later, a more mature Layla waits as the day of Phillen's long-awaited return from battle arrives. A cheerful maid reminds Layla that surely Phillen has ached for his fiancée in their long separation. The remark kindles a small hope in Layla. She arises and regards herself in the mirror, taking in the fine silken dress accentuating her figure, chosen specially for this reunion. It has been some time since Layla has made such an effort with her appearance. In Phillen's absence, she has capably managed their estates through hard years of blight, disease and strife. but their people ultimately persevered. Layla's mind fills with anticipation, wondering what kind of man the past 6 years have forged Phillen into. As summons arrives, Phillen's envoy approaches. Taking a steadying breath, Layla joins the arrayed household outside to await his arrival. She stands poised with dignified patience, but her pulses flutter at the prospect of seeing her betrothed lord again as a mature woman. In time, Phillen's banner crests the horizon, his mounted party drawing incrementally nearer. As his tall silhouette comes into focus, Layla lifts a hand in greeting, color rising unbidden to her cheeks. But she lowers it slowly as the scene before her sinks in. A striking unknown woman rides tucked intimately in front of Phillen, her arms entwined possessively about his neck. Layla's smile evaporates into bewilderment. Who is this stranger accompanying her husband-to-be in such an improper fashion?
Oh boy, talk about a plot twist. Here's Layla, all poise and polish, waiting for her Phillen to return from war, like a loyal duchess in waiting, only to be greeted by Phillen and some mystery woman canoodling on horseback. Forget hearts fluttering. Hers must have felt like they were doing the cha-cha slide in her chest. Poor Layla's gone from expecting a Prince Charming to caught in the middle of a love triangle real quick. Chapter 2.
Layla stood frozen in place, her heart pounding in her chest as she witnessed the shocking scene unfolding before her eyes. Her fiancé, Phillen, who had been absent for so long, had returned with another woman in his arms. The stranger, a shapely blonde with lustrous locks and porcelain skin, exuded a sense of intimacy that sent a wave of disbelief through Layla. The gathered staff whispered in hushed tones, their speculation swirling around the visible pregnancy of the blonde woman. The swell of her belly was unmistakable, and it stirred shock and bewilderment among those present. Before the assumptions could fully take hold, Layla's loyal maid, Misa, stepped forward to interject. She suggested that perhaps there was a misunderstanding, a misinterpretation of the situation that would soon be clarified. Mortified and unable to speak, Layla felt trapped in the midst of the unfolding drama. The words of the staff echoed loudly in her ears, mirroring her own thoughts and fears. As she struggled to make sense of the situation, a sense of dread crept over her, mingling with a deep sense of betrayal. As the envoy representing Phillen approached, Layla's heart raced with insecurity. Was this truly just a misunderstanding? What should she do in this bewildering situation? She pondered silently. Closing her eyes briefly, Layla entertained thoughts of lashing out at the woman, of cursing her, or simply walking away while nursing her resentment in silence. But deep down, she knew she had no right to act on any of those impulses. She was not Phillen's wife, not the Duchess of the estate, but merely the Beezer, an outsider in this tangled web of emotions. Lost in her own insecurities, Layla shifted uneasily in her place as Phillen dismounted his horse and called out to her. His voice cut through the tumult of her thoughts, questioning her silence and if she lost her tongue. Layla looks up at Phillen, silent and unsure. A smile creeps on his face as he approaches Layla and asks if she had forgotten to speak after 6 years. Layla, forcing a smile, could only manage to stammer out that she was merely surprised. Phillen turns back to his horse, looks at Layla and asks her what she means. Confounded by his sheer audacity, Layla searches for words as suspicion kindles. Is this brazen behavior a deliberate test, or is that child really his own? Her unspoken questions are swiftly answered. Layla watches crestfallen as Phillen reaches out to lift the blonde woman from his mount. He lavishes doting attention upon his companion, tenderly leading her with protective care as if her delicate condition may shatter from a harsh breeze alone. Their intimacy speaks loudly through longing gazes they exchanged. As the pair walked off, utter turmoil engulfs the gathered staff at their duke's outrageous display in front of his own betrothed. Frozen amidst the eruption of disbelieving gossip around her, only one prevailing sentiment slices through Layla's ringing humiliation. Though their engagement was not of love, common decency alone should forbid blatant infidelity before a promised bride. With a decisive turn, Phillen beckons Miser to his side. Flashing a charming smile, he inquires Cecily of her room preference, understanding her need for rest. Cecily's face lights up as she requests a room flooded with sunshine. Phillen then pivots back to Miser, his voice firm as he directs her to escort Cecily to the room at the end of the east corridor. Miser is taken aback by her master's choice of chambers for the woman. Layla is utterly baffled by Phillen's choice of chambers for the mysterious Cecily. The significance of that room is not lost on her. That room is the Duchess's room, Layla protests, her voice tinged with concern. Phillen's indifferent response only adds to her confusion. Does he not understand the custom? Layla persists, explaining that only the Duchess is permitted to use that room. Phillen counters, revealing that his father once slept in that room, and Layla herself has used it as well. Layla explains that her father held the esteemed position of head of the mansion, and she herself had only used it as a workspace as the little Duchess. Despite her reasoned explanation, Phillen remains unyielding, citing the room's superior lighting as his reasoning. Layla bites her lower lip as she considers her next words, suggesting other rooms with ample lighting, but is swiftly cut off by Phillen. Arms crossed in front of him, Phillen asserts his authority as the head of the mansion, declaring that he will not tolerate further complaints about a room that sees no use. He firmly establishes his authority as the Duke in setting the rules of the house, leaving no room for argument. Layla, now standing stoically with her eyes closed, can only offer a silent nod of understanding as the situation unfolds. As Cecily departs, a sly smile plays upon her lips as she casts a knowing glance at Layla. Phillen stands by Layla's side, studying her brooding expression. Sensing the tension in the air, he ventures to ask if Layla is upset, his voice curious and probing.
Well, isn't this peak soap opera drama? So, Phillen's back in town after 6 long years with a baby mama drama. Then, he's playing Let's Arrange the Mansion without even consulting Layla, the poor girl. You can practically hear the collective gasps of the staff, witnessing the Duke's audacity. Layla's probably torn between exploding in anger and just burying her head in the nearest cushion to muffle the chaos around her. Chapter 3.
Etched on Layla's face was utter confusion as Phillen asked if she was mad. She looked down, her heart pounding, and answered resolutely, no. Phillen's scowl deepened, his eyes searching hers, before grunting okay in response. Back within the walls of the castle, Layla's mind whirled with the recent turn of events. Her fiancé's return had brought more than just his presence. He had arrived with a mysterious, seemingly pregnant woman in tow, granting her sanctuary in the sanctum of the Duchess's chambers. A heavy sigh escaped her lips, betraying the weight of her burden, even as Miser expressed her concerns. Running her fingers through her hair, Layla offered her maid a reassuring smile, masking the turmoil within. What could she say? Even if she admitted her true feelings, nothing would change the situation at hand. She had prepared endlessly for Phillen's return, only to be met with the unwelcome surprise of an unknown woman infiltrating their home. Despite the longing for solace, duty beckoned. Rising quietly from her seat, Layla gently informs Miser of their next task, and reminds her to remain vigilant for any signs of trouble. As rain pelted the windows of the William mansion, Layla found herself immersed in the endless sea of documents spread before her. 9 years of meticulous work lay scattered across the desk, a testament to her unwavering dedication to Phillen's affairs. Yet, due to today's preparations, she found herself falling behind. She recalled the initial skepticism she faced, now a distant memory compared to the pressure to maintain perfection. Lightning cracked, jolting her from her reverie, triggering memories of a tragic stormy night that still haunted her soul. Fear gripped Layla's heart as she dropped the document, her hands flying to cover her ears. Memories of the stormy night when tragedy struck the former Duchess and Duke flooded her mind, each clap of thunder a painful reminder of her past. Tears threatened to spill as she struggled to compose herself, the weight of loneliness and fear bearing down on her once more. Huddled at her desk, Layla couldn't help but wonder if Phillen remembered that fateful day. Did he understand her pain, or had he already forgotten, callously replacing her with the mysterious woman now occupying the Duchess's chambers? The audacity of his question still stung, echoing through her thoughts like a bitter refrain. A soft knock broke the silence, followed by the gentle voice of a maid announcing dinner. Without missing a step, Layla gracefully emerged from her chamber, her demeanor now poised and composed. She explained to the maid that her absorption in work had led to the delay, but on this significant day of Phillen's return, it was only fitting that they dine together. Despite the inner turmoil she anticipated, adhering to the proprieties of family etiquette remained paramount, even if the prospect of meeting Phillen's gaze across the table stirred discomfort within her. As Layla strolled alongside her usher, the young maid beside her couldn't help but pout in a comical display. Even after all this time, the Duke was too much, she remarked, earning a soft chuckle from Layla as she observed her companion's antics. Upon entering the dinner hall, they were greeted by the sight of two flustered dinner staff members, their frantic movements signaling the chaos that surrounded the Duke's return. Layla passes by them, aware the two must be busy with preparations. As she walked along, a kitchen maid pushing a kitchen cart passed her by, offering a polite greeting to the mistress. The sight of the laden cart caught Layla's attention, prompting her to abruptly halt the maid's progress. With wide eyes, she inquired about the destination of the food, prompting the maid to stop in concern. Layla questioned why the cart was being taken away at dinner time, to which the maid timidly explained that the master had requested to dine in his room due to fatigue. Layla processed the maid's words, her attending maid equally stunned by the revelation from the dinner staff. In the quiet moments of solitude, Layla often found herself drawn to the imposing presence of the Willett family portrait. Standing before it, she would ponder her place within this family. While the former Duke and Duchess loved and called her their daughter, Layla knew it wasn't the full truth. With a hesitant hand, she reached out to the portrait, her fingers close but not touching the visages of the family she yearned to call her own. Despite a decade spent within the confines of the manor's walls, she remained an outsider, forever tethered to the fringes of acceptance. The notion of suggesting a familial dinner with Phillen seemed absurd. She had no right. Layla knew all too well the limitations of her station. No matter how fervently the inhabitants of the mansion wished to see her integrated into the Willett family, they too understood the immutable truth of her circumstances. Clutching her hand close to her chest, Layla felt a wave of insecurity crash over her once more. With a measured breath, she turned her attention to the abundance of food adorning the cart, her voice steady as she remarked on the excessive quantity for a single diner. The kitchen maid's worried gaze met hers, her words faltering as she struggled to respond. Layla's heart sank as the truth unfurled before her. "Is the Duke?" she began, her voice trailing off as dread gripped her soul. Before she could finish her sentence, the kitchen maid interjected, confirming her fears, "The Duke will be dining with his guest." Anger surged through Layla's veins, a tempest of emotions threatening to consume her. Clenching her hands at her sides, she trembled with a potent mix of frustration and betrayal. Without a word, she turned on her heel and strode away, the kitchen maid's calls of concern fading into the background. Layla sat back in her study, engrossed in her work, when an elderly man burst into the room in a flurry of urgency. He informed her of an urgent document that required her attention. Layla's brow furrowed as she regarded him, but before he could finish his sentence, she interrupted him with a stern tone. "Forward all of the Duke's business to Phillen himself," she declared firmly, cutting off any further attempts to involve her in matters that rightfully belonged to her fiancé.
Goodness gracious, talk about a royal mess. Layla must feel like she's trapped in a never-ending saga of twists and turns with Phillen's return. He waltzes in with a mystery woman, turns the mansion upside down, and then has the audacity to request a private dinner with his new guest. Come on, Phillen, read the room. Layla's probably contemplating launching that entire cart of food straight at his head. And let's not forget the nerve of that kitchen maid, trying to play it cool while serving up steaming plates of betrayal. Layla's had enough of this nonsense and is taking charge like the boss she is. Phillen can deal with his own mess from now on. Thank you very much. Chapter 4.
In the sanctuary of her private quarters, Layla immerses herself in the soothing waters of her bath, her gaze lost in the void. She wrestles with her thoughts, questioning her next course of action. Her mind remains a whirlwind of recent events, each memory playing like a haunting melody. She recalls an earlier encounter when a staff member had presented her with an array of paperwork, all addressed to the Duke. With a firm resolve, she had declined the documents, informing him that with the Duke's return, such responsibilities were no longer hers to shoulder. The bewildered staff member walks down the hallway, the bundle of paperwork clutched tightly in his grasp. He mutters to himself, a sense of confusion clouding his features. In his 30 years of service to the Williot household, he had never experienced such perplexity. He timidly questions if the Duke would even comprehend the complexity of the documents. Outside Phillen's chamber door, a scowl darkens his features as he demands an explanation for why the documents have been redirected to him when it was Layla who does them. In response, the staff member retorts that in Phillen's absence, Layla had taken on the task on his behalf. Phillen's expression tightens as he recalls that even before his departure for the war, it was Layla who had shouldered the responsibility of the paperwork. The elderly staff member stammers, struggling to convey his thoughts. In his mind, he reveals that Layla had undertaken the tasks during a period when Phillen was consumed by grief over the loss of his parents, isolating himself in solitary sword training. A smirk plays on Phillen's lips as he leans casually against the doorframe, a hint of amusement in his eyes. He assumes that it was Layla who orchestrated the staff's visit to him, attributing her actions to a longing for his presence after their time apart. As the scene unfolds, a slender arm gracefully enters the frame, belonging to Cecily, who steps into view and clings onto Phillen, affectionately calling his name, Phil. Phillen turns his gaze towards her, concern evident in his eyes as he inquires about what is troubling her. The blonde woman gazes up at Phillen with innocence shining in her eyes, confessing that she is feeling bored. Phillen tenderly places his hand on Cecily's face, his voice filled with love and care as he reminds her that as she is pregnant, she should not strain herself with excessive work. A palpable sense of love and affection envelops the air around them, capturing the attention of the staff member who watches the intimate moment in awe. Turning his attention back to the staff member by the door, Phillen instructs him to take the paperwork to Layla, suggesting that she was probably only sulking. The staff, visibly concerned about the urgency of the task, hesitantly argues that the document needs to be completed by the day. However, Phillen fixes him with a stern gaze, insisting that he follow his orders without question. With a resolute expression, Phillen firmly shuts the door on the elderly man's face, disregarding his protests as he stands on the other side. Inside the room, Cecily poses a question to Phillen, inquiring if Layla is his fiancé, to which Phillen affirms with a simple yes. As Cecily settles into a chair, she observes the familiarity between Phillen and his fiancé, noting the absence of honorifics in their address to each other. Phillen explains that their closeness stems from their shared history, having grown up together since childhood. Cecily's delicate hand flies to her mouth in a gesture of shock, her expression scandalized as she remarks on the impropriety of such informal interactions, especially considering Layla's noble lineage as the daughter of a count. She warns Phillen of potential objections from other nobles, emphasizing the importance of maintaining decorum in their interactions. Sitting down beside Cecily on the couch, Phillen's expression reflects a mix of concern and confusion at her words. Cecily leans in carefully against Phillen's shoulder, her voice soft and measured as she highlights the importance of Layla adopting a more formal manner of speech when addressing Phillen, or else the other nobles may begin to look down on him. As night descends, the elderly staff member, clutching the document tightly, gazes at Layla with a comical expression of desperation, his eyes pleading and on the verge of tears. Layla lets out a weary sigh and accepts the paperwork from him, assuming that Phillen must have refused to handle it himself. She reflects on his tendency to avoid such tasks for the past decade, questioning why he would suddenly change his ways now. However, she acknowledges that she cannot continue to cover for him, recognizing that she is not a member of his family. Turning her attention to the paperwork, Layla begins to work on it, resolving to have a conversation with Phillen about his responsibilities. The thought of addressing the presence of another woman in his life also crosses her mind, prompting a frustrated grumble to escape her lips. The staff member, noticing her demeanor, inquires if she is all right, to which Layla forces a chuckle and reassures him that she is fine. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning cracks through the air, causing Layla's hands to tremble as she hands the completed document back to the staff member. She informs him that she has reviewed it and it is now ready for implementation. The staff member expresses his apologies for disturbing her at such a late hour, grateful for her dedication to the task at hand. Layla stands, still clutching her hand to steady herself, and assures the departing staff member that it was not a problem and that they should also rest. As the staff member leaves the room, Layla lets out a sigh of relief and settles onto her bed. The lightning outside continues to fill the air, casting flickering shadows across the room. Huddling on the edge of her bed, Layla clutches her hands to her ears, attempting to reassure herself that there is nothing to fear, that it is only thunder. However, the look of utter fear on her face betrays her words. The relentless lightning persists, and Layla lies down on her bed, pulling a pillow over her head to muffle the sound. In the midst of the storm, Layla's thoughts drift to her loyal maid, Misa, wishing she was by her side in that moment. Memories flood her mind of when she was younger, and Misa would calmly reassure her and comfort her fears, often with a cup of warm milk. Tears stream down Layla's cheeks as she listens to the thunder shaking her to the core, longing for the comfort and security that Misa's presence provided. Misa is standing by as the Duke and Cecily sit on the couch. Lightning claps and Cecily gives out a small shriek. Phillen asks if she is afraid of lightning, to which the blonde woman retorts a meek yes. Phillen holds the woman's chin between his fingers and announces that he will stay in the young woman's room for the night. Misa darts her eyes away as she calls for her master. Phillen, now locked in a kiss with Cecily, looks at the maid with a scowl. Misa hesitantly asks if she can leave, feeling uneasy. Finally, Phillen dismisses her and she walks towards the exit of the room. However, before she can leave, Cecily speaks up, informing Phillen that her waist and legs are in pain from riding the horse for too long. Phillen, visibly concerned, asks if she would like some medicine for the pain. Cecily, with a soft smile, declines the offer of medicine and instead expresses her desire for a massage to soothe her aching muscles instead.
This paperwork drama has Phillen shuffling his responsibilities. Does he think Layla is his personal secretary or something? And that scene with Cecily talk about awkward. She's obviously got Phillen wrapped around her finger. Poor Layla all alone during a storm, just longing for days when Misa would chase away her fears with warm milk. Chapter 5.
Misa averts her gaze to the floor, her expression clouded with confusion. She informs the Duke that there is another maid who is better suited for giving massages, and she will notify Lady Layla accordingly. At the mention of Layla's name, Phillen becomes visibly irritated and commands the maid to proceed with massaging Cecily herself. Misa closes her eyes, feeling powerless to object, and calmly acknowledges his command. As lightning flashes and rain pounds against the Williot household, Layla lies alone on her bed, curled up in a fetal position, while Phillen gazes up at the darkened sky, sipping his wine. The following morning, Layla sits in her chambers, her gaze weary as she turns to look behind her. Dark circles have formed under her eyes after a stormy night, leaving her unable to get a wink of sleep. Phillen stands behind her, holding a note, and informs her that it is something urgent. Handing the note to Layla, he explains that it is an invitation to the celebration of the new emperor's enthronement next month. Realizing the proximity of the date and the distance to the capital, Layla knows she only has 3 weeks to prepare her dress, shoes, and accessories. She resolves to contact the tailor immediately. As she reads the note, Layla casually asks Phillen about his plans for staying in the capital and reminds him to prepare his attire promptly to ensure they make it on time. However, before she can finish discussing their preparations for the event, Phillen interrupts her. With a stern expression, he informs her that from now on, she must address him formally using honorifics. Layla is stunned by Phillen's words, her confusion evident in her gaze as she looks at him. His explanation only adds to her bewilderment. Phillen asserts that since he will now be attending upper-class events, he cannot risk being ridiculed because of Layla's casual manner of speaking to him. His cold demeanor sends a chill down Layla's spine as he implies that she wouldn't want him to face embarrassment in front of other nobles. Clutching the letter tightly in her hand, Layla falls silent, her mind racing with questions. She reflects on the fact that Phillen had never expressed any concerns about their previous interactions before. Could it be that woman influencing him to change his attitude towards her? Layla turns around and expresses her understanding, stating that she will address him only as the Duke in public from now on. She adds that Phillen should also refrain from addressing her casually as a Layla in public settings. Phillen quietly agrees to her request, and Layla proceeds to discuss their preparations further. Layla mentions her intention to summon a designer to the mansion to create dresses for the occasion. As Phillen takes a seat on the couch, he suggests having a dress made for Cecily as well. He explains that he plans to bring Cecily along to the capital to prevent her from feeling bored if left alone in the mansion. Layla listens silently, her gaze lowered as she clenches her fist in frustration. Despite her inner turmoil, she reluctantly tells Phillen that he is free to make his own decisions. Phillen continues by asserting that as the hostess of the mansion, it is Layla's responsibility to provide clothing for her guest, Cecily. Layla's anger flares up at Phillen's nonchalant response, unable to believe he still considers her the owner of the mansion. Phillen casually asserts that she is indeed the owner, as she will be the one he marries. This only fuels Layla's frustration as she clenches her fist, questioning how he can shamelessly ask her to accommodate the woman carrying his child. Phillen laughs, finding it amusing that Layla is angry over that, and his laughter only serves to aggravate Layla further. He approaches her and places a hand on her arm, calmly explaining that he cannot abandon his child from the woman he impulsively got pregnant. Meeting Layla's gaze, he declares that as soon as Cecily gives birth, he will undoubtedly remove her from the mansion because Layla is his one and only wife. She discerns the similarity between his words and those of her father, who had formally acknowledged her as Lady Thabisa after bringing her into his household as his child from another woman. With a flick of her hand, she indicates her understanding of his meaning. Meeting his gaze squarely, she conveys to him that if he truly regards her as a prospective spouse, then he should never expect her to yield to Cecily. Phillen, who is usually impassive towards Layla, is visibly taken aback by her defiant posture. In the garden grounds, 2 staff members engage in conversation while attending to their duties. They exchange gossip about the obvious between the lady and the Duke, noting their newfound formality in addressing each other. Speculating on whether this shift is due to the presence of the woman the Duke brought into the household, they ponder aloud if the lady will be ousted once the mistress gives birth. Suddenly, Layla emerges from behind them, catching them off guard. They immediately bow in respect, stumbling over their words as they attempt to explain themselves. However, Layla interrupts them with a hint of sadness, acknowledging the partial truth in their words. Horrified, the staff members watch as the lady walks away. Walking through the empty hallways inside the castle, Layla reflects on her arranged marriage with Phillen. She admits to herself that she never harbored hopes of love. Her sole desire was to escape her abusive home. Witnessing her future husband's affection toward another woman is agonizing, yet Layla halts abruptly, her expression twisted in horrified shock. Despite the pain, she convinces herself that she can endure it as long as she doesn't have to confront the woman directly. However, her wishes are dashed as the very woman she sought to avoid stands before her. Cecily, adorned in a pink lace dress, exudes innocence and charm as she smiles and greets Layla warmly.
Oh, the tension in that castle is thicker than the thickest fog. Layla's trying to keep it together, but it's like walking on a tightrope with Phillen and Cecily playing tug-of-war with her emotions. Don't get me started on Phillen's sudden formalities. Dude, you can't just flip a switch and expect Layla to start addressing you like some royal highness. Layla's doing her best to keep her cool, but you can practically see the steam coming out of her ears, and now Phillen's all. Make dresses for Cecily too, and also she's coming to the capital with us. Layla's biting her tongue so hard. It's a wonder she hasn't drawn blood yet. He says Layla is his one and only wife, but I don't believe him. Then there's Cecily, waltzing around like she owns the place. The nerve. So that's the first 5 chapters of this manhwa. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more. Thanks for watching.